All right, everyone, big news of the day. We now have a partial government shutdown, largely prefaced on the border wall. See, Trump has decided to draw a line in the sand. He's saying, no, I want my wall funding. I want an installment on that. By the way, that's not the entire funding amount. We're talking, people think that the $5 billion or whatever he's asking for is for the whole wall. It's actually like 20 billion for the whole thing, or actually more, several tens of billions. That is for the most important upgrades that need to be made. It was funny because the other day he puts out basically what amounts to a meme. He's like, "Oh, here's our big beautiful wall," and it's actually more like a big plated fence, which is already in place in some parts of the border. It's more effective than maybe a 10-foot chain link or whatever they usually use. It is an upgraded sort of style of defense. It is harder to climb, it is more sturdy, it is more long-lasting, and provides better protection for the agents on our side of the border. Some people are acting like it's a big problem. I think that they were thinking of a medieval-style fortification, like a 20-foot thick, 30-foot tall slanted wall with like parapets and towers everywhere. You're not going to get, and like catapults. You're not going to end up getting such a thing. The government shutdown, number one, it's not the end of the world. We've had several already, by the way, under the Trump administration. We had like, half a dozen of them under the Obama admin. The Republicans, funnily enough, were the ones rambling about how crazy it was the first time, like when the first shutdown loomed. In the Obama admin, because Obama was stubborn and didn't like negotiating. Trump's been trying with both Pelosi and Schumer. It's actually Pelosi holding out. Schumer's been willing to talk to him. This is the Pelosi shutdown, and it will come to be seen that way if it drags on for long enough. I can remember all the Republicans, the further right's like, martial law is going to be declared, this is the end times, Obama's the Antichrist and stuff like that. Now the left is doing that to Trump, which shows it's the same kind of alarmism. You get people that have been sort of drinking the Kool-Aid, they're kind of zealous and alarmist anyway, and then you can whip them up into a frenzy. Ultimately, that's what happened with some of the Tea Party, because the Glenn Becks, they pretend, in some cases, their leaders were pretending more than being actually genuine about their fervorous beliefs. Trump takes the initial blame. You can see right now Trump's shutdown is trending worldwide. That will begin to change, because what will happen is that media spin machine loses control after the first 24 to 48 hours. If the shutdown continues for, let's say, a week or two, by the end of that, Nancy Pelosi will primarily be the one getting the blame. They'll come out with a bunch of polls that the media will inevitably bury that'll show that. What will happen is people's opinion will change throughout that span of time. I support the shutdown as well, because you got to understand, people are like, well, federal workers won't get their paycheck before Christmas. Okay, they're going to get that money. Because every other time there's been a shutdown, what happens is technically they're working without pay. Congress always makes the notes good after, and they get paid anyway through a separate appropriation. That's what'll end up happening. Ultimately, the country doesn't save any money from a government shutdown. If anything, it loses more. It shouldn't work that way. What should happen is, no, Congress cannot appropriate that money. Make them feel the pain. Congress doesn't get that month's salary or that quarter's salary or something. If there's a shutdown in the quarter, you don't get a fucking penny of it. Government workers don't get paid insofar as they're, off the clock. They're not actually showing up to work. If they're working without pay, then they should get the money after, because they're doing the work. It should be more biting. One of the problems is it affects so little. It has so little effect on the population. It's like Obama deliberately shut things down that didn't technically need to be shut down to make it more scary when that happened, which actually strategically was, kind of a good idea, although it really raised some eyebrows on the right. It's like nobody on the right liked him anyway. The Trump shutdown will probably not last quite as long, because what you're likely to see is that at least some of the Democrats will say, hey, why don't we give him a partial funding of this, negotiate with him, we pass the budget, because otherwise, if this continues to drag on, we can cast Trump off as baby-like, or he wants to have just his way or whatever. He ultimately, though, is reaching out his hand and saying, hey, let's make a deal. Eventually, the voters are going to see that, and it's going to become a problem. The Schumers of the party are the ones more likely to attempt to get that going. The problem is Pelosi now controls the House, fundamentally. She will stand in the way. She is more stubborn. We've seen it before. Pelosi's the one that's actually stubborn, wants 100% of what she wants, and she's not willing to give you anything no matter what position you're in. If she can lock down the system, she'll do that and go on her merry way. Other big news today, of course, Ginsburg, who's she's in failing health, dude. She had 2 more cancerous lumps removed. She just had a fall a month ago. What more need you say? She's 85 years old. How many more medical emergencies can she have before she keels over? People on the left look at her like she's some sort of ironclad Valkyrie or something. No, she's a frail old lady who's barely holding on. And Pelosi, likewise, is very similar. Pelosi's mind has begun to go, although, as far as common sense goes, not necessarily all there to begin with. I think some people would agree, including some Democrats. This is, by the way, why the Democratic Party has some difficulties with voter outreach. You have a situation where the Democrats are going to sit there and browbeat and say, well, Trump shut down the government, and then people will say, the obvious flip side, which is, hey, you're shutting it down too, because you could just give him the funding, and there wouldn't be a shutdown. He wouldn't have a problem with the budget. It takes 2 to tango. In part, it is a Trump shutdown. The thing is, I think that at least Trump's core fans want that shutdown. They're tired of waiting on the wall anyway. They're not going to blame Trump. If anything, this will make them like him more. The centrists are going to look and yawn because it's like, oh, another government shutdown? Wow, that's never happened before. 20 times in the last decade or some crazy amount. It happens all the time. Then Ronald Reagan's son actually was chiming in on Twitter and talking with regards to the border wall, with regards to Trump. And he's like, well, years ago, my dad tried to make a deal on this amnesty for border protection. It's now or never, basically. Yeah, basically, and this is what I alluded to, fucking 3 years ago or something? That was what would ultimately need to be done. You're going to have to give some degree of amnesty, residency, or whatever to certain classes of illegals. In so doing, you then need to demand a more coherent border defense system. You need better monitoring, and you need a better physical barrier. The rest can wait. All of the other policies are secondary. If the border has become secured and you've taken some of the pressure off of the legal immigration system by not having so much of a problem there, and you can focus on deporting people who are more legitimately illegally here. Someone comes here as a 2-year-old. Most Americans agree that they should be allowed to stay. But someone comes here as a 20-year-old, and they're not a veteran, they're not in college, and there's no specific, they're not a refugee or something. Most Americans want them deported. It has nothing to do with race. They'd want them deported if they were from, Eastern Europe as much as if they were from Mexico or anywhere else. Color of their skin doesn't apply. Immigrant is not a race. Some people seem to think that it is. Anyway, the idea that because the wall that Trump has settled on apparently is more like a giant iron fence with plates at the top, it doesn't matter. A modern wall construction is not the same as it was 1,000 years ago. Yes, I understand that a big Byzantine-style fortification would look pretty cool. You could stylize it quite highly. It would be more aesthetically pleasing. But would it ultimately be easier to maintain? No. Ultimately, this kind of wall is much easier and cheaper to build. It's just as effective, ultimately. And if someone's trying to scale it, the hope is that you can prevent that from happening. Right now, we need better border defenses. I think I stand with Trump with regards to shutting the government down. It is a temporary measure, honestly. It's not saving us money. It's an attempt to salvage a situation in which Pelosi is attempting to keep the border unsecured so that her corporate buddies can keep having slaves come in. That's all it's about. That's about all. Peace out.